And it looks like we're live. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Trekyards. He is Commander Cockins.
He's kind of funny. There's no third box with a face, but there's a special guest star. I'm confused, Stuart. Where is the...
There's an omnipotent voice. We have a guest. Introduce yourself, sir. Just quiet now.
Oh, boomer tech moment there.
Great intro. So we have Dave Cullen joining us today. So, yeah, tell us a little about yourself.
I do reviews of stuff. Sometimes I'm a bit complainy, but mostly I'm just a guy with an opinion on YouTube, like anyone else. So,
Well, is it fair to say that and this I often find out in anyone's reviews, that to say you like something can be a few seconds, but when you actually have a thing that has a multi-level reason why you don't like a thing because of canon, the explanation can be minutes. So just almost the disparity of like versus dislike, one involves a discussion. Fair to say, almost?
well, yeah. Look, I mean, I try to delve as deeply as I can into the motivations behind a story, I suppose, and in particular, what I've really enjoyed doing lately is reviewing old movies from the 70s, particularly old sci-fi dystopian movies, and the era at that time, and what was happening, and politically, and why that was the current trend at that moment. And I've really enjoyed doing that sort of thing. But I mean, Star Trek was always the first love since I was a kid. I think the first movie I can remember was Star Trek 3, Search for Spock, and even though it's not considered as good as 2 or 4 or 6, whatever, it remains my favorite Trek film.
One of my
because
favorites too.
do you know what I mean? You always love whatever series you started with. That's typically your favorite Star Trek. I find that with most people, and it's the same with the movies.
Yeah, Stuart has a giant soft spot for 4. He will defend it to its...
No, 3.
That's what I meant.
Yes,
Sorry, I'm in April Fool's mode. Sorry.
Well,
Sorry,
2,
Stuart.
3, and 4. It's fine. So
I'm going to start showing this, Stuart. You can do your spiel.
you share it. I got some super chat to read here. Ozzy, who's been a member for 37 months at the rank of Federation Council, which is the best rank to be at, says, I ordered Miss Olivia to deliver pizza or pineapple pizza to Starbase 80 with blood wine and prune juice, a warrior's drink. Damn, Ozzy. I'm sure she appreciates that. And no, I don't want you to talk to me, Siri. Birder of Prey 5 throws in $5. Dave, you don't think Patrick Stewart using a bottle of Jameson as cheap whiskey was an insult to Ireland? Up the long ladder was less offensive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I don't know if they I love there's still a barcode on the Jameson bottle. They didn't even change it at all. Must be like
There was a barcode. I didn't even notice that, actually.
Yeah. Must be like a retro vintage, like limited run they did in the future.
So I wonder if they got some money from that, and that helped to fund a few things for the season.
I wondered that too, because in some of the shots, it's not really the label's not really pointed clearly at the camera. So I'm just wondering if it was just what was on hand. But that's usually you have to fuzz those things out if there's anything like that going on. So guys, hit that like button and be sure to check out the links down below to the Trekyards merchandise. We want to see you guys wearing some cool Trekyards stuff. Help us any way you can, hitting that like button, super chatting in. If you have any questions for Dave or anything you want to say, we do read them all on the air. So that's your choice or your chance to get your voice heard. So by all means, consider supporting the channel in any way that you're able to. We really appreciate that. All right, and we're going to be basically doing a retrospective of the first 4 episodes of Picard season 3 and having a discussion. It's good to have different points of view, IDIC and all that, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So, it's good to have people on that don't always necessarily agree. I watch a lot of Dave Cullen stuff, and it's fair to say I don't agree with all of it. But I've been watching him for a while now, so.
And I'd still be happy to be on if you agreed with none of it, Stuart. I'm still very grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you guys, because you do incredible work, and I've really enjoyed watching, especially since, it's funny, like I actually sort of tapped out of Star Trek like about last year or so, and I sort of stopped watching entirely. But since season 3, because I was sort of prepared for season 3 to be, I didn't like season 1 or 2, but I've fallen in love with it all over again, and I'm going back and watching all the other series again. So it's amazing the effect. Like this, I've done a lot of streams lately, and I haven't done any streams in ages. But I've gone back and done a lot of collaborations, because for the first time since I think Enterprise ended, I've actually been excited about the franchise again. So it's for me. I know season 3 hasn't been for everyone, and some people are like, they still don't get what we're talking. Why we think it's so good, but it's rekindled something in me as a fan, for sure, and it's been wonderful to be able to have conversations with you guys and other people. So,
well, I've been meaning. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Like, what do you think of Lower Decks, Prodigy, and Strange New Worlds? Then,
I have to confess, I've not watched Prodigy or the Lower Decks, but I've heard in particular that
they're not very long,
Yeah. I know. I've heard that Prodigy is particularly good, and sort of like it's some of the best Star Trek out there. Strange New Worlds season 1, I did watch a few, and as the season went on, I don't know, I sort of lost interest, and then I start watching the Orville again. But I was impressed with some of Strange New Worlds, and there was like Spock Amok, and there was another one, I can never remember the name of it, the one where they're in the nebula and they're fighting the Gorn. I thought that was a brilliant episode, actually.
Memorial Mente, I think.
There you go. And I've heard very good things about the season finale, which is sort of ties in canonically to the events of my mind is blanking now, very famous original series episode with the Errand of Mercy. So, Balance of Terror. There we go.
Yeah.
Well, it's because when you compare Discovery seasons 1, 2, and somewhat 3 and somewhat 4, I mean, Lower Decks and Prodigy are night and day. I mean, it's kind of sad in a way, because they both respect canon fully, use canon fully, and you'll see random things. As their confidence grew as both shows went on, they will throw in a random TNG character with the same actor for a very short performance. They're like, well, yeah, this makes sense. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Versus 2016's Trek or 09. So yeah, I mean, Lower Deck's obviously more of a stylized, but I for one love the first episode because I saw what they were doing, and the fact they actually cram more story into 21 minutes than Discovery episodes in 50 minutes is a certain type of talent, and they did that most times, and it's much better than Discovery. So go watch Lower Decks.
Well, that's what I actually like about where the franchise is going overall, especially within the last few years, is it seems to be drawing more on, like, even visually, right? We're seeing things that we haven't seen for a while, ship designs, uniforms, whatever it might be. Whereas it felt, and I think, like, there's a few channels, and I first noticed this, Midnight's Edge did a big investigation into what happened with the split with Paramount and CBS after Enterprise, and that when JJ came in, there was this secret hideout, secret hideout. They wanted, or sorry, it was Bad Robot at the time. They had to stylistically change things design-wise. You guys can probably speak to this. There was like a 25% difference. My dog has just walked in here. He's just opened the door. He's Worf. His name is Worf. So they had to do things differently. They had to visually make the show and the films look different to the Star Trek that we knew canonically, and so it seems now that it's coming back full circle,
which is good.
Yeah,
evolution back to the original.
Yes. Brett Cooper though throws in $5. Says Dave is a saucy flirt, always mentioning he's seen the whole season. Yes, indeed. I was surprised to hear that you got a chance to see the whole season.
Always bragging.
Yeah.
And occasionally spoiling things, but nothing serious. I did mess up 1 or 2 times, but nothing crazy.
What?
You can ask me you could ask me 3 yes or no questions.
I'll just mute you
twice. I will lie twice and tell one truth, which also might be a lie.
But that's the irony, is you can say things. If we don't know they're spoilers, we won't know they're spoilers. But that's the great thing about knowing it. There's out of context stuff. That's why if you watch a film trailer, you've seen the movie, but it doesn't mean you know the storyline, at least for better made trailers where it's more abstract.
Well, it's very strange because I'm watching these, like, okay, so I'll say this and it won't give anything away, or it shouldn't anyway, because the description is out there. So when I watched these weeks ago, I was able to watch the first 6 within a few hours, whereas people are now watching. So we're coming up to 5, and you're watching them over 5 weeks, right? So it's a very different way of assimilating it and, consuming this season, which is that you make your assessment over a much longer period of time. And people can jump to conclusions. Like, some people are like, they weren't sold after the first 2 episodes or so. And I'm like, just stay with it, But I had the benefit of just going from one episode to the next, right? And then I could see, oh yeah, this is actually very strong and it's getting stronger. But I did, obviously, when I watched, how am I gonna say this to you without telling you anything? Have you seen the description for the next episode, which is called Imposters?
I try and avoid that stuff in general.
Okay, well, there you go. Well, my point is, I didn't read. Obviously, that wasn't published until a few days ago, so I would never have seen a description like that for the episode. So whatever surprises may or may not be in that episode, obviously they were genuinely very shocking. But if you put out a description and you read the description first, you as a fan can begin to make guesses, which obviously might eventually ruin the surprise if you manage to guess correctly.
Or even you have a better idea. Because let's be honest, budgetary constraints and lack of time equal ideas that aren't necessarily fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
That's just
reality. They had considerable budget issues to deal with this season.
Yeah.
They've done obviously, as you know, season 2 and 3 film back to back, and even though they tried to save money by filming season 2 mostly around Los Angeles, location shooting is still extraordinarily expensive, whereas this season they had to keep it primarily bottle based. But actually it's stronger for it, because what do they say, that the mother of invention being
necessity is the mother of invention.
Necessity. There you go. Because of the fact that they were so hamstrung, like they were really had to get creative, and it's probably the reason why we keep going back to that bar in the holodeck, right? But it works, it still works.
Well, I find it funny that compared to seasons 1 and 2, that the idea of it being in the ship is now a weird bottle show idea. Have you seen TNG? They're always in the ship. People come to the ship and they have the occasional outside, and the outside's often inside in a studio. So them being in the ship, of course, actually adds to the production value, because now they're getting to have, an LA alleyway will only look so good. Inside of a ship, you're seeing tens of thousands of dollars in every inch, and if you add stuff to it to make it interesting, besides that, it's production value. I when I hear bottle shows, like, that's what Star Trek is. We're on ships. I mean, DS9, my God, when do they ever get out? When they're in the middle of the Dominion War, do they ever leave a ship? Probably not for 27 episodes in a row.
That's a very good Anorak kind of question, is which of the Star Trek series had the least amount of location shooting? I'd love to know.
Yeah.
Which one had the most?
Enterprise probably the most,
Yeah,
if they had
TOS
more money.
probably had the least amount.
But then is on location, if that's next door on the big red rock.
That's going to be right, too.
Well, no, I literally mean the planet Hell, like literally the rock they were on.
Yeah.
But Stuart, there's a poll. Did you see? Did you know?
I saw it pop up, but I didn't read it. So let's see what the poll is saying. If you had to vote for one that you'd enjoy the most, not necessarily the best, but you enjoy the most,
yes,
would be Lower Decks, Prodigy, or Strange New Worlds. That's a good poll, actually.
Yeah, because I mean, with personal enjoyment, like you said earlier, your first you might like for certain reasons. You might say, it's not actually the best, but you like it for your own reasons. Or they want me one character that you gravitate towards so much that just becomes your favorite because of that. Yeah. It happens, and can't judge people for it.
Area 51 is here and throws in $5.
Thank you.
It says, I can't get Shaw's Wolf 359 story out of my head. What a performance. Yeah, it was fantastic. And it's funny, last night, me and my wife have been going through watching Supernatural, because I've never seen it all, and she only saw it till season 6. So we're going through and watching it, and we're on like season 4. And there's a black and white one called Monster Movie, and it's got like a typical Dracula, you know, like a Bela Lugosi type deal. Turns out that is Todd Stashwick playing Dracula, and she's like, "You're never gonna believe who that is," and I'm like, "Who? Give me a hint." She says it's the captain. I'm like, "It's Shaw," and then as soon as I said that, I couldn't get that out of my head because I just saw Shaw then. But yeah, it was just a strange coincidence. So,
and he was on Enterprise as well.
Yeah, he's been on a lot of stuff. Yeah.
It's amazing when you go back to like 80s movies and you see all the young stars when they got their first rubbish role. I'm, person number 3, but I said line. It's like, and now you're an Oscar winner. Nice. Yeah. It's amazing.
Go back and watch any of those shows. Like we just finished watching House, and then we watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We've watched, X-Files, and you see it's a who's who because every episode it's like it's that guy. You gotta
it used to be like everyone's been on The Next Generation. That's the way it was in the 1990s. Everyone's been on at some point, and there was always that show. It's like everybody has been on Stargate SG-1, But you watch Buffy. I was a massive Buffy and Angel fan, and in particular, I preferred Angel because I just found it more.
The ending of that was bullshit. I'm just saying that.
What?
That's a big cliffhanger. It's like apparently it carries on in the comics. But.
It was people go, it's a cliffhanger. It's like it was a statement. It was a statement that the fight never ends, and it's like there'll always be another battle against evil and everything else. And but I love that. And actually, funnily enough, to bring up season 5 of Angel, it reminds me a lot of the budgetary constraints they had this season on Picard season 3 because they really were. They did a huge season 4 on that show, and they did lots of location, lots of big fights. And suddenly it was like they slashed the budget to the bone, and they still had 22 episodes to do, and so they brought it all in house, mostly in the Wolfram and Hart sets. They did have some location shooting, but they still managed to make the show not look cheap, and so it became essentially a bottle-based show. They were in those sets quite a bit, but I like that. I like there's so many shows now that I feel like that's probably going to change more and more, but they throw so many millions at the episodes, and you don't necessarily see the creativity, that you used to do, and I feel maybe Star Trek has had too much money to play with. It's probably time to just go back to basics and tell the story.
It's like we know, Dave, that the NHS is riddled with bad money spend. They have inordinate amounts of money, they just poorly spend it in lots of ways. And so if they can waste 5 million, should they even have that 5 million in the first place? But if you're given 5 million, have to make every dollar count. Guess what? You might even get a better service. So they're like, we actually have this budget, and we've got to make the episodes. Let's be as clever as possible. And like I say, and the fact is, we don't necessarily want to see Picard on the bridge yelling at Riker to do a maneuver. You kind of want to see them talk in corridors about really important issues. Isn't one more engaging and cost them dollars? One costs them more because more CG budget. That's the more engaging stuff, surely. I just wish that the La Sirena set wasn't as awful as it is, because that's a problem. If you don't have really good sets that look really good, then obviously all the standing conversations just look, oh dear. And I think La Sirena's one of the worst sets they've ever made.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking there. It's a hideous. Like, is it even a bridge? Is it even a bridge, or is it some sort of warehouse that you're in?
Yeah, because if that was a nice Starfleet ship, all the scenes of them would just be better. Like, you can tell the way they light it. They just shove it at the back where the glowy thing is, because that's the only light source. It's the only thing interesting to look at. And it's like, you're really limited massively there.
The irony is they actually made it look good by redressing the bottom part of it and turning it into the Shrike. That's actually it looks better redressed as it
does look better redressed, yeah. All that honeycomb vibes.
Now the thing we've been saying all along is this should have been season 1 of Picard. Kind of like a TNG season 8. Now, having seen the whole thing, would you agree with that? And then they should have started this way and then transitioned into new characters instead of doing it completely the opposite way around.
Away from new characters, yeah.
Yeah. And I know Terry fought for this because Kurtzman and them thought they knew what Star Trek fans wanted, or they would just automatically show up because it's Star Trek. But what are your thoughts on that? Would this have made a good season 8 of TNG?
I mean, I think it's less like a season 8 TNG and more like like what Robert Meyer Burnett described it, which is like it's a 10-hour Star Trek: The Next Generation movie that we never got. That's why I would agree. I mean, it's kind of hard to sit down and watch 10 hours, consecutively. But I would say I actually had no problem with Star Trek Picard going in the direction it did in the beginning, which is the idea that it was, Picard. It was about that character specifically, and if he had interesting stories to tell in his latter years, great, focus on that character. And I think the character alone, outside of the ensemble of the TNG cast, was more than strong enough to carry a show. But he was surrounded by a new cast that I didn't warm to, and I actually thought Remembrance was a decent start. And even the elements of the second episode weren't bad, but I found that with the first two seasons there was always a lack of coherence in story from one episode to the next, and things that, let's just say, I don't think would have happened under Berman era Trek, which was my favorite era. So I just thought that sorry to answer your questions, I'm just going to go off on a tangent otherwise. No, I had no problem with the TNG cast coming back later in another season. But yeah, in terms of quality of writing and characterization, because this is a very character-focused show, what I've loved is that all of the characters, including Picard, are much more like the characters we remember. I mean, Picard is, as you've seen already, large and in charge. He's no problem taking command, whereas it felt very much like he was taking a back seat to some of the other characters and was getting sort of pushed around a bit. Maybe he wasn't as confident in those other two seasons. So all of that's there, and what's great is that we're seeing these characters come back. They're older, they're different, and yet they're the same, which is the way they should be, which is the way you should be as you mature. So there you go.
Because it's more of a question of how do you screw up the TNG cast, how do you screw up Picard, and they did it for 2 years. That's impressive. Like Nemesis is not well liked for a lot of its character stuff when they do it kind of wrong, or at least it doesn't work quite as well. But when the actors are good, it kind of elevates everything. And if you don't even have them feeling like themselves, you're never going to be who you are 20 years later. But you're still going to be, you became what you were after 60 years of life. You're not going to change that all of a sudden. And now we've seen flashbacks. Now this last bit of Picard before his sad time in Picard season 1. For me, it makes it feel even more disingenuous. Season 1 that is that sad, given that he was casually going out for lunch in LA 2 years earlier. Now, you could be sad some days, but season 1 was clearly showing us, I think the quote was, he's just there waiting to die. That's not how he was playing the other scene in season 3, the flashback. Obviously, that's them retconning it, but you can be old, but you don't have to be who he was.
But there's a few franchises that have done this story of they come back and there's a character from a long time, a fan favorite character, and they're now broken, and it's like Han and Leia.
Who's done it right though?
Well,
Star Wars
maybe there are
either.
examples. Maybe there are examples, but certainly with Star Wars characters, with Luke Skywalker, they didn't do it right, and with Picard, I don't think they did it right. I don't think they gave fans what they wanted to see, and we don't need to just keep revisiting old characters. And they're now world weary and cynical, and they've grown hard. We don't need to see that. It's possible.
Who's it for?
It's lazy writing.
It's not for Trek fans.
What's the problem? Yeah, it wasn't for Trek fans. And then that's what the podcast guys made a good point in their one video. They just assumed that Trek fans would show up regardless because it's new Trek, but it wasn't made for them necessarily. So, Ian Smith, though, member for 12 months at the rank of lieutenant. So thank you so much, Ian.
Thank you.
Says, greetings, Cap, Commander, and Dave. So happy to see two of my favorite channels together. Dave,
thank you.
Which episode of the season is your favorite? And no spoilers, but why? Thanks.
Oh, wow.
That's
well, unfortunately, I have to say episode 5, which we can't talk about. So I think it's fair to say you're going to get a nice big ending to this season. It's maybe putting it mildly, but having watched it again, I would say, and when you see it, you'll probably be surprised by my answer, but 5 and 9 are my favorites.
It won't surprise you that we're probably going to like episode 6 the most. But we'll see.
Yes, I could imagine that. Yeah.
We've been told that he might like 6. So, yeah. Hold on a second here.
Yeah, like I said, it's just, one of the amazing things about this season is that everyone is themselves. I mean, Worf walking in, being himself. But as Stuart asked you earlier, is it an ensemble show? Well, the fact that Troy's had nothing to do, ostensibly, Geordie's not been in it yet, and we're 40% through, shows you it's not a TNG season 8, because they were an ensemble show. Everyone was in everything almost entirely. Versus, maybe, if you remove the Raffi and Worf subplot from episodes 1, 2, and 3, and I guess 4, could you edit that down to an hour and 50, 2 hours and 10 and be a movie and just be about the Shrike and the Nebula? Yes, I think you could. So maybe it's more like 3 TNG movies with different casts focusing different parts of it. This is the...
Well, Samuel, I'll say this, because I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, in particular, the Raffi stuff, right? You could have literally dispensed with all that stuff on Metalis and everything, and you could have literally shown... So the first time that Vadic uses the portal weapon on the Titan, and then they could have gone, what the hell is this thing? And then someone on the bridge could have gone, sir, according to my readings, this thing matches the configuration of something that was stolen recently from Daystrom Station. Bang. And that's the whole Raffi thing, like, totally unnecessary, running around. Because whenever you were watching those first couple of episodes, you were like, just get back to the Titan. Just get back to the Titan.
The pace hit the wall every time. Yeah. It got better when Worf appeared, obviously. That was going to happen. But yeah, it would have been a sight better without that. And the shame is that Raffi, she's actually a good actress when she's given good stuff. I mean, they all are in general, but she does do well. But I noticed in the first 3, she repeats her same exact dialogue in every episode, to the point where they're just padding, because she doesn't have to reiterate to her handler the mission he put her on every week, because that's what she did.
Yeah, there's a lot
3
of,
episodes in a row.
But what else did they steal from Daystrom? And why would they use a portal? Yeah.
Why are you asking me? It's my mission. You're just here.
Yeah. Well, look, all I say is she definitely does become one of the team, which is what she should be. And it just felt like in the first couple of seasons that all of these characters are not really team players, And when it comes to Star Trek, what makes it very utopian and what makes it so enjoyable to watch is that all of these people are professionals. They're the best at what they do, and they're emotionally stable, which she often isn't. And she gets better as it goes on. But that these people are aspirational. That they're the best of the best, and they're not easily fazed by anything. And so I'm glad we're sort of seeing echoes of that again.
Well, there's 2 examples of that, and my dad always comments that none of the Discovery crew in Season 1 could have made it through Starfleet with how they approach their professionalism. None of them are capable of being officers. They just don't act that way. And then, second note, then you look at TNG, and there's many episodes where there's a countdown time of 10 seconds till they die. And none of them even do anything. That's professionalism. And then yes, it might be silly in a certain sense, but if you're at Helm 2... at Con, you can't save the ship yourself. I guess I'll just stay calm and let myself... Oh, wait, we lived. Cool. Beep, beep, beep. And then you look at Discovery. It's like none of this stuff is at all relatable as being anything remotely. It works for Tilly because she was pulled out of the academy, but they forget it instantly. I assume you'd agree with that they're not remotely a Starfleet officer material, any of them.
Yeah, everything has to... It's always very emotional. Everybody has to talk about their feelings and hug it out.
I mean, that's fine in your quarters... because you're allowed to be people, just be officers
first. So your
first.
college dorm room, it's not good. Yeah. It's not like they don't have the psychological profile of people who are strong, who don't crack under pressure. And for example, like the scene I often cite, which is very subtle and people don't really focus too much on it, is when Picard goes to see Shaw in his quarters in episode 4, and he says to him, need your help, even if you are a dipshit from Chicago. And Shaw's response is, nice. In other words, like, that's the sort of thing you'd probably expect to see between standard banter between military officers. Give as good as you get. You earn respect that way. Then you just get on with the work. You don't go there, carrying your heart, upset, or having a shouting match or whatever. You just get on with it because there's a bigger picture of we need to save the ship, we need to save the day. Right, you're going to work with me. Yeah, of course. All right, you're an asshole, but whatever. I don't like you, but we're going to dig in and get on with it together. And that's just how it is. And that's, you win respect with someone like Shaw when you stand up to him. And that, I felt that was subtle, probably something that people feel is insignificant, but it shows the maturity in the writing and the characterization.
Well, to get to a captain position, you might have been, and especially if hair dye stays a thing in the 25th century, so you can choose to be grey in your 70s or 80s, longer than Shaw would be necessarily be age-wise. They might have been dealing with these sorts of problems and discussions for 50 years, and Picard for 70 or 80 years. You know exactly how to deal with them. This is not new. The way you just said, that's how you deal with them. They know this. They don't need to go all the other ways.
Yeah. We have 197 people here, which is amazing, guys. Hit that like button. We're at 90 likes. Let's try to get those likes up to above 100. And please super chat in any thoughts, comments, questions you might have, because we do read those all on the air, and it's a good way to get your voice out there to be heard. So
you control the conversation, guys.
So. Exactly, yeah. Now, a question for Dave, again, having seen the whole thing. It feels like we just finished like the first part, and we're going to move on to a second part. Is it like a 3-act performance? Is like there 3 distinct points to the story this season, or is it just a 2-beat story? What's the deal?
No, I think like for now that the Nebula thing is over, that act is definitely done. I think given the events of 5, it sets it up very nicely for the rest of the story arc in the season. So I think 5 and 6 go very well together. I think the tone changes a little in 7. I don't like that one. It's very exposition heavy, but 7 and 8 definitely would work together, and then 9 and 10. That's how I would put it.
I mean, it does make sense. I said this 3 weeks in a row because I felt like they were going to move past the Nebula, but it feels as if the first couple are the chessboard being set up, and then they can move forward. If that makes sense.
Yes. There you go.
Okay.
That's my answer.
Perfect. Good Tea, Nice House throws in $5, so thank you so much. Growing the beard has its own meaning in the TV world. Can we make throwing the asteroid the official term for you can trust the writers? Oh, I like that. Sure.
That's pretty good.
Let's do that.
I can't remember which YouTuber said this, but the idea of the giant space battle or one rock being thrown, one has 1,000 times more weight because it was set up, paid off, small and logical, versus just lots and lots of pew-pews in space. Who are these ships? No one cares. It's amazing the difference.
Yeah. Let's see. Guys, hit that like button. We have 103 likes. I think we can do better. Let's get to 150. I'm challenging you guys.
What do you think, then, Dave, didn't work in the first 4, besides Raffi's introduction?
Yeah, like I wasn't oversold on some of the. I know some people really like it, right? Because I think they generally have good chemistry, but I'm not oversold on this tension between Shaw and Seven. It felt a little arbitrary, and I guess having heard Shaw's speech in the which is delivered wonderfully in Holodeck. And his, the guy has a serious trauma there that he's nursing from Wolf 359, and he has an issue with the Borg and all that sort of stuff. This business of refusing to call her 7 of 9 and wanting to call her Hansen, guess that now makes sense. I have to say, though, I have thoughts on, I actually said this to Terry, and he liked this idea, okay? So I'll say this. I think that the development of 7 of 9 as a character should have gone differently, especially after she came back to Earth. And I think, she's still carrying her slave name. Because I look at it like, Muhammad Ali said that Cassius Clay was like a slave name. And if you look at Roots, you had LeVar Burton was on that show too. And, he was called Toby, and that was his slave name. He was really Kinte Kunte. And I look at it the same way. I think 7 should have actually have embraced her original human name, and we as the audience would have to adapt to that, I suppose, because Seven of Nine was the name that was forced upon her by people who stole her childhood, her family, and made her do terrible, terrible things. I mean, literally murder and assimilate people. So I feel that there was an opportunity there to further symbolize this character's reformation and her rehabilitation. And I think there's a missed opportunity there. Instead, you could have flipped it the other way. They could still have had conflict around her name. He could have literally been giving her stick. Let's say she wanted to be called Hansen, Annika Hansen, and instead he refuses and calls her, Commander Seven, or is it Miss Nine? He could have been a dick to her about this, and she could have been, no, I'm trying to move on and get past this, and he's been an asshole to me about it. That's the way they could have focused it. But instead they've gone with what they've gone with, which is that she seems to prefer to be called the name that was forced upon her. So I don't understand what the thinking was.
I wonder who made that choice, because it feels obviously backwards.
Yeah, we even said the same thing going into this season. I wonder if that's what she's going to do. So.
It symbolizes everything she doesn't want to be. You can understand she's kept Seven on Voyager because that's all she had. She had her crew and these 145 people and her life. So she'd go back home, she would meet her family, they would embrace her, she would, choose who she was and wanted to be, and she'd want to move past that. If I was writing, I would have had her be Commander Annika Hansen, but my friends call me Seven, and thereby you get to have both, the cake and eat it, in terms of promotional material, but then Shaw could use Seven without being her friend, and therefore the name becomes a bit more tainted with him, but then Picard comes on and says Seven, and she's like, oh yeah, I forgot how that can sound from a friend. So you get the cake and eat it too, and that seems far more logical to me. What do you think if that was the case, Dave?
Yeah, and look, if you look at Janeway, she was often, obviously they were having a lot of conflict, and she, I guess, saw Janeway was like a sort of a mother figure in the sense that she was rebelling against, like a parental figure she was rebelling against. Mm-hmm. But as you grow older, you learn that maybe my parents were right after all, and then you start to become like your parents in some ways. And so maybe she could have changed along those lines. I don't know. And then you could have, because I really hate what they did with her in season one. Like, she was this murderous alcoholic, right? And so realistically, like, they could have taken that. They could have used that and go, that was some sort of like latent, rebellious teenage phase where she was processing a lot of anger, and she's come out the other end, and now she's a different person. I don't like this, like, she still doesn't quite know where she fits in thing. I just think this is sort of lazy. I mean, the woman is 50 now, it's like she should know, but it's sort of a hangover I feel from some of these shows where there's people are just not well adjusted or something.
Although she's 50, but she's only actually lived like 21 years of her life
as a human. Yeah,
she doesn't remember the other years, so really she's only 21. I mean, she didn't come out acting like an adult, so she's not actually 15 in terms of mindset.
Then we have last season where it's like Starfleet, looked down on the X-Borg and wouldn't let me join. And
yes, they would.
We had that whole discussion, which we didn't buy for a second.
Well, but I mean, Jerry Ryan must have, as an actress, she got 3 entirely different seasons, written by 3 entirely different people with 3 entirely different visions. The character is not remotely consistent, but the actress can do 3 different things. They just don't work together, and they're not well thought out, because they weren't thought out. It's very strange. There's nothing there to pull from.
Well, I think the reason for this was they wanted a Data on the Next Generation. On Voyager. They wanted a Data character. They wanted someone who, and they wanted something that Voyager often was stuck, I feel, creatively in third gear, even though I like the show very much, but it didn't often take risks. And that level of character development was not something we would often have seen on a serialized or a standalone type Star Trek show in that period. And I think they just sort of didn't want to change things because she was 7 and she was sexy and she was brought on the show for a reason to boost ratings. And, and it was like, just don't mess with the formula too much. Just leave it as it is. And so I feel they were a little bit hamstrung in terms of what they could have done. There was a lot of potential there with the character, but that wouldn't have made her 7 anymore. She wouldn't have been sexy, partially ex-Borg in this skin tight outfit, right?
Yeah. Good Tea Nice House throws in $5. It says, Dave, I agree with you. 7 of 9, tertiary adjunct of Unimatrix 01 is her full name. Janeway and crew affectionately called her 7. Yeah,
that as well.
Yeah.
I just think you take both. Take all the power back. You know?
Yeah.
Because you think you'd meet your family. We know she had an aunt back on Earth. You could retcon that and say she had cousins. Maybe had, you could imagine if she had like a full house of Hansons. Said, you know what? Doesn't matter with the Borg connection. We love you, even though we never met you, or met you when you were 1. Like the amount of love you can imagine coming back from that. Because there aren't stories of, Borg coming back and being human. I mean, you would think a lot of people would say, "My God, this brings hope to the galaxy. This woman who was taken as a child is relatively adjusted." I'll say well adjusted. She's functional. She lived through the worst thing of middle of her life. Here she is alive. The crew of Voyager worked out how to undo assimilation for the most part. Like, you think she represents hope for a lot of people anyway.
Yeah, exactly. The XBs, as it were. You would think so, yeah. But they didn't address that, and the only thing that they did was a negative spin on it. Last season, little conversation she has in the chateau, be like, yeah, Starfleet looked down on me and wouldn't let me join, essentially, which we thought was bullshit. So,
yeah. Well, Icheb joined Starfleet.
Yeah, poor Icheb.
But Icheb joined Starfleet. Why are they not letting Seven? Seven did way more than Icheb. Seven also had more years of unborgness.
Yeah. 7 could have been using it as an excuse too. She was kind of afraid. She didn't want to go back. But
did Jerry know that when giving them performance? Probably not, if it was even there, etc.
Yeah.
But it's sad because, I mean, they're all good actors and actresses. All of them. Even the original cast, they could all do great scenes. It's just the material. And imagine if they actually planned out 3 years,
In season 2, I mean, so I don't know. There was a few theories as to why this was the case. But so you had Q, and then he's like, "I'm dying alone," and it's like, "Wait, don't you have a son though?" And also, like, yeah, and it's not like John Delancey wouldn't have been aware, like, would have forgotten
his actual son.
It was actually his son in reality. But maybe it's like, look, because I know that young man didn't want to be an actor anymore, so maybe they thought it was sort of irrelevant. But they could. That's fine. Didn't just bring in another actor to play the role. I just thought that was really strange. But again, it's like the Guinan thing, right? Guinan doesn't recognize Picard when they go back in time. And then there was, so I don't know whether it was Paramount Plus or someone, there was some statement made, I think it was on Twitter, to try to explain that the change to the timeline had caused this. Like, no, you've got that wrong. That doesn't make any sense in the continuity you're working with, because you haven't gone back far enough. She's been on Earth for hundreds of years. And I just think, you were dealing with some people who maybe didn't know the franchises as well as they were letting on. Maybe.
But also, as soon as you start rewriting mid-season, and logically, therefore, if you're having to rewrite as you film, or at least a week away, things can crop in really easily. And then that's now canon. That's now, oh no, what have we done, etc. Me and Stu did a really, really fun 2-hour live on season 1 of Picard, where we looked at all of the story threads that were set up and never went anywhere, and it filled 2 hours of constant conversation. It was like 20 or 30 things, because the show kept promising ideas, and it's actually the simplest season ever in terms of storyline, because they kept throwing stuff out there, and
I was amazed at some of the stuff they got away with, though. You remember, so there was a couple of things. Jurati, I think, has a line where she's just, nobody wants to see this, right? Nobody wants to see in the future that people are complaining about being in space and talking about their feelings. Like, it's not good writing. It's like, instead of showing it in your characterization and your attitudes and your actions, she's talking about how depressing it is to be on a spaceship. Like, when the rest of us would be like, I'd love to be in space, I'd love to go into space, and she's depressed, and she's like, 3 billion stars in the galaxy. I'm like, wait, what did you just say? She said something like this.
Yeah,
and it's like,
now.
How do you make these kinds of mistakes on Star Trek? Yeah. So, and then there was something else. There was a story. We talked about the Icheb thing, And then there was a story. There was one episode where I don't know why the Romulan lady had an Irish accent and was like cheeky feckers and sláinte and all this sort of stuff. I'm like using these Irish sayings. I'm like, I don't know what they were trying to do there. Right? Anyway, bad dream. And she uses this device that what did he call it? Molecular
bullshit machine. Yes.
Yeah. There was 2 bullshit machines.
There was
that one which reconstructed past events magically, right?
Amazing. Every season, use every season. Just have it. Use it. There you go.
Yeah. And then there was one at the end of the season, which was basically the sonic screwdriver, which Rios used. Just think in your mind, and it'll do what you want it to do. So, I never seen before, never seen again.
Yeah.
It's the we didn't write ourselves out of this, so we wrote a thing to do it. And you mentioned a second ago with remembering things like with John Delancey and his son, etc. The simple fact they never mention Lol in season 1, Data's actual child, in a season about Data's not children, or Lore, didn't mention him either. I mean, simple things that obviously need to be mentioned, like first episode, that you wonder. I mean, Michael Chabon just didn't care about that to do that, but it's like you do this. And in this season, Terry's actually addressing the simple things like, why is the holodeck power? There's a full scene about it, pretty much. It's shocking the loose ends he's tying up by just saying it logically. Very useful.
Yeah. I'm having issues with the YouTube.
Well, let me ask you on that point of things that you may appreciate, and certainly I do as a fan. So now we could debate whether this makes logical sense and so on and so forth, but there was that line in the holodeck. First, I find the first one. He says to Jack, listen, if you don't like the simulation, we can have another one. And I'm like, no, you can't, because you don't have the money. But anyway, that's not the end of that. But he says, so look, there's an independent power supply, which explains why the ship is basically sinking and there's no power, and yet the holodeck's still going, because it's like a sanctuary. And when he says it's a small independent power module or something, and I like that explanation. It works. But we could then delve into, does it really work? Because on the next generation of Voyager, we were told that there was independent systems from the warp core and everything. And the reason for that is obviously because we want to be able to do stories where they get locked in the
gravity. Also gravity at all times.
Right. But in this, you could say that in the 25th century, the holodeck doesn't use nearly as much power as it used to on 24th century ships, and it's much more power efficient. And it's basically like the low energy light bulb now, right? Doesn't use nearly as much power, but it gets the job done. And I liked that explanation. But did it necessarily? At least this is what I'll say. There are lots of things throughout the season where fans would go, hang on, why did they do this? And if you just wait till the next episode, it's explained.
Right.
And they really did do that very well.
But also, there must be a certain element of they know that going in, and the discourse of some fans, and certainly in the other new Treks, the reaction value, it's still justified in that until you get the answer, it's allowed to not make sense. So you get the article saying, this doesn't make sense, and if it's answered next week, then obviously those people will then, here it is. You got the clicks for it, they got the free promotion, but there's the answer, because we wrote it in like 8 months ago, we filmed it 6 months ago, and there it is. We win, because we had it.
It's because Terry knows that people like us will ask those questions. That's why on Twitter, when people are asking questions, he's like, just keep watching the show. There will be answers coming out. So, yeah, I think
that's the thing. Exactly, Stuart, because you're dealing with someone he's a very different, because he's such a hardcore fan. And what I found, having spoken to him, and certainly the results speak for themselves in terms of his work. You can clearly see the attention to detail. Like I think he wanted to win over his harshest critics from the harshest critics from the first 2 seasons, for sure. Because he was only like a secondary sort of producer, I guess, on the second season, and he wrote a couple episodes, but he wasn't the boss. And as the remaining showrunner, he could do whatever he wanted. And I think he saw the arguments and the criticisms that Trek has had recently. And, without going into all of that, he felt that there were certain flavors, as he describes it, of Star Trek that had been missing, that people wanted to see. I think that's putting it mildly. There's lots of Star Trek elements that were missing. And I'd say for you guys at Trekyards, you've had a lot less sort of spaceshipy stuff to talk about with Star Trek Picard seasons 1 and 2, and he's given you tons of stuff now.
Oh,
so,
yes.
Right, and lots.
We're going to be busy.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it is. We were told that like a year ago. You guys are going to love season. Next season, you're going to be busy. So, Ray Ricks though throws in 10 pounds and says, "Good to have Dave here. Really enjoy this season. Shame it has to be so long to get good rating or solid rating in Picard. Looking forward to the rest of the season. Hopefully we can't more, or I think he meant to say can get more Trek like this. Yes, 100% right.
Well, as everybody knows, the case study of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Discovery was polarizing. Almost everyone liked season 2 for Pike and Spock, not for the season, but for Pike and Spock. People asked, they got an entire show, which is the best reviewed show since Picard season 3. So, case study already exists. Now, in fairness, that was when they were throwing money at streaming services. That time has now passed by a good few months, so that will not happen the same way. They're not going to burn money again. But there is a case study directly for fan interest.
And also, I mean, they're slashing everything to the bone now, from what I understand, at Paramount Plus. And unfortunately, we are headed into a recession, which means that large companies are going to be looking for ways to cut back. And I suppose in some ways, if they really wanted to keep Trek on the air, they should be going to someone like Terry Matalas, because he did this show on a shoestring. I mean, obviously the TNG cast would have been probably the biggest expense, but they had standing sets left over from the first, especially the second season, and they didn't have to build very much. So they were able to do this, like we said before, very inexpensively. And so he would certainly be, it's that Berman era stuff. It's like, if you can do it in set, do it. You have to budget your scripts, and they didn't really have to do that in Star Trek up until recently, and it's probably a good thing.
And the irony is, they did film 26 hours of television for a while in 1 year. The fact they can just about make 10, because budgets have done weird things, and post-production's huge, and something like this, if it cost, substantially less, and let's be honest, the TNG cast probably cost, a third of the entire season budget, if not more. But that's the entire reason people are watching, at least at the start. I mean, you don't release a trailer for the next season during the last season when people are hating on it, just with the new cast, who are the old cast, and then sometimes everyone's excited again. It's like, yes, that's why you hired them, and I think a third is fair to say, if not 40% of the entire season budget.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Well, the necessity is the mother of invention thing you mentioned earlier is a good point, because the best Star Trek movies had the least budget. Star Trek 2, Star Trek 6, because the ones before them didn't do very well, so they cut back. And you find that those are the most creative and the best of the movies that are fondly remembered. So, yeah, Star Trek
2 makes use of huge chunks of archive from motion picture, and I don't know.
God, yeah. And whoever looks at Reliant says, "Oh God, that's just the Enterprise set." It's like, well, it's a standard ship set with different upholstery. It's new! Because if you have one good set, one good bridge, it really goes a long way. Really. Like, I'm somewhat assuming we'll see the Titan set be the Intrepid or be another bridge. Because, of course, they're not going to build a new secondary bridge. As, some redressing would do wonders for it to make it look different. There's so much space, you can do a lot with it, etc.
Well, yeah, they've already used it for the Stargazer, so yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't really redress it. They just turned different lights on or off. The case would be.
I wish they left those lights on, but not going there again.
Yes.
Troy Ulysses throws in £5.
Thank you.
Dave, having seen all of season 3, is it best watch after All Good Things or Nemesis? Plus, does Tom Hardy return as a new Buck clone Picard?
What a twist!
Yes, Tom Hardy is behind the red door.
Shins on A.
Oh no.
No, so look, Nemesis obviously for the full TNG story. I mean, I don't think Nemesis is a particularly strong movie, but there's certain elements about it I really like. With Star Trek, particularly those first 10 movies, there was even the ones that weren't as strong. There was always positives inside them. But no, I think you probably should watch TNG. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. You should have a knowledge of those things. The events of Nemesis are, I mean, they're touched upon throughout Picard. That's a series.
How many times can Data die and be brought back?
Yeah. So.
I'm going to ask everybody again. We have almost 300 people here, which is amazing. Hit that like button. Let's try to get up to 200 likes if possible. Really appreciate that. And hopefully we can keep the conversation going a little bit longer. So please put in your 2 cents, super chat in, and help us.
Literally, he means, just for context.
As well as add to the conversation. We want to hear your thoughts on the first 4 episodes this season.
Because this might be Dave's last live stream ever. You don't know, so ask him a question. You know.
Wait, why is something going to happen to me, Samuel? Am I dying?
Well, look, the synth bodies. Picard took the last one, okay? So, if you're
in the next 10 episodes of your life, Dave, and we're not going to give you spoilers.
Jeez, I hope. I haven't seen episode 11 yet, so I've just seen the first 10, and
yeah,
I've overused that joke now. I got to stop.
Yeah.
But it's tricky when now the shows are very much wrapping down in terms of Prodigy is not commissioned yet. Strange Worlds is season 3ing, but that's takes a while to make. There's no season 6 of Discovery. There's no season 4 of Picard. The era of weekly Trek is over. We had it for 1 year, but if they don't commission a new Terry Picard era show, off the hype of this, every week that goes by, as after it's finished, every week that goes by, the interest will be less just by the nature of social media moving on as a story. And also then every week you wait, you then might take another 3 months of production time to get into it. And if you commission a show in a year, it might be 2026, and then all the hype's gone. You always kind of, I'm sure this in Terry's mind, but
look, even if, let's say, Star Trek went on a high, I think there is going to be an announcement actually in the next little while of a particular. Yeah, I can't really say too much about that. Maybe I'll talk to you off air. But I'll say that if this era of Star Trek ends, right, let's say they take a break, and maybe not as long as between the original series and motion picture, but if they take a few years off, they're obviously going to have to come back and say, okay, budgets being what they are, because I'd imagine they'll come back with smaller budgets. What worked? If we did an analysis of what worked over the last few years and what saved money, what was cost effective, pick up the phone to the man who saved us the most money and delivered the most critical acclaim. Maybe it's not, but that's not going to be enough, right? Because it's going to ultimately come down to the subscription model for Paramount Plus. What project delivered the most amount of subscriptions? And that's actually another subject entirely, which is streaming services changing the format of the way storytelling is done, which I do resent a little bit, because even though I really like this season and I don't technically have any major problem with Mystery Box, it is Mystery Box format and it's not standalone. I know Strange New Worlds is a throwback to standalone, but it shouldn't be a throwback. Most of Star Trek, I think, should be standalone with a little bit of arc and 2-parters and that sort of thing, maybe 3-parters. But that has been a little bit of a frustration, that we're still in that, Mystery Box format where the episodes are written, and Stranger Things did this very well as well. It's written almost algorithmically, right? Where they give you just enough story to addict you and hook you in. You have to watch the next one. You must watch the next one. Why? Because they really want to shift as many subscriptions as they can.
Well, and pause there for a second. Did you realize that in season 2 of Discovery, every single episode ended on epic checkout next week? Like the last 2 minutes was a really cool leading into next week, which are always interesting, and the payouts were rarely good because, like you say, stay on next week, and they were shockingly interesting. We kept saying, "Oh, next week's gonna be great," and the bit they tease is good, and then the episode happens.
It's totally resolved within 10 seconds of the beginning of the next episode.
It's really interesting, totally different style to have that.
Brendan McLaughlin throws in $8 Australian, so thank you.
Cool.
I would like to see a spin-off with the Titan with Shaw at the helm. Yeah, I'm becoming a huge fan of Captain Shaw, so I'd love to see that as well. Matthew DeFreitas, $2. Is there another big samurai war fight coming? Samurai War fight.
That's not to us, Dave.
Spoilers. Yeah.
Well, it's funny how people were like complaining when they saw, oh, Worf's a pacifist. Oh my God, they've destroyed Worf, and now they're like, Worf's too violent. He's chopping people's heads off. And
yeah.
So like there's still great stuff. There's still great stuff with Worf, and there is till the end. Actually, oh man, I wish I could say more.
It's frustrating knowing stuff. For sure.
Well, and do you think there's a slight problem? Obviously, you do a lot of the social commentary stuff. The idea that literally one or two Twitter voices can be pulled as a case study and therefore say that. I mean, how many people really said, "Oh, the pacifist line," and actually got pissed at it? I relate that, and I'm still annoyed by this. That Discovery season 1, because she's black, and a couple of people said Michael Burn's black, therefore I don't like it. And I'm thinking, I've not heard that from anybody. No one I know anywhere said he's a pacifist, Worf, therefore I hate the season. But if you pick up on the 3 people and every opinion have some whatever, well, 3 people said it. It's now a story.
Actually, you're right. I mean, on the Burnham thing, I think there was more of an issue with the fact that there was people going, how come the media is making a big deal about this being a diverse female when we already had Sisko and we had Uhura as, you know what I mean? It's
Star
like,
Trek 3 captain.
30
years earlier.
It's like when they make a big deal about like Captain Marvel, and it's like, oh man, she's a strong female star, and you're like, I listed off like that when that came out, like something at the time 38-40 movies where there was a primary female character.
It's not new
in a superhero. Yeah, so it's nothing new. But
was that similar thing for Worf? Did somebody just gravitate towards a couple of people saying it? Because I never thought, wow, I got it as a joke instantly. I had zero thoughts about it.
When you have this whole influencer thing on social media, it just takes a few charismatic people to offer a very strong opinion on something, and then everyone else goes and it's like football punditry, And I remember myself, like you listen to pundits for long enough, and then eventually you're down the pub with your friends. And you go, yeah, he should put such and such at number 11. Why hasn't he done that already? It's like you listen to somebody say that on a panel on television. It's exactly the same thing. It's like it's a laziness. It's like an intellectual laziness where it's like, well, what do you really think? And does it really bother you? The Worf thing, it's like I knew when I saw that, and he's on the transporter pad, and he's got the big sword head that on his back. It's like I knew that was basically a character gag, and that it was more of like a something he was aspiring to, but there was got to be some funny riff on whatever it was. Because you know what? Like, Worf is best when he's like saying something deadpan and it comes off as humorous. And that's the other thing. Like, to speak about the cast, like Michael Dorn, he's like all of them. Worf has never been better. Riker's never been better. I mean, I think we're just getting the best out of this cast. And even Gates McFadden. Like, I never knew that these people were as good as they actually are. And Jonathan Frakes, like he didn't even have much like belief in his ability. Like Terry was like, he said, I don't act anymore. I'm not like, you want me to do this? It's like, I don't know if I can do. I was like, you're a fantastic actor, and look what he's delivered in episodes 3 and 4 alone. He's been superb, and they all have been. So
and it helps that they're able to stay. They've sort of maneuvered them to the roles we know them in, which gets you that familiar energy that we're used to, and then yet gives them the side scenes. So seeing Riker take command and give us flawless, how do I save the ship dialogue, which he just sells, and then has these emotional scenes with Picard, you're having the cake and eating it. And everyone's having a great time. Whereas like I thought in season 1, Riker offering pizza was okay. It was okay. But then Deanna doing counselling was freaking just incredible. She was so on the ball with that, because they were giving her functional but yet characterful stuff. Because at the end of the day, these people represent a certain job, what they do is what they do. If Worf was out on a Riser planet season of a show, he wouldn't really work as well. You can need him in the field in some form. I mean, on just a mission format, because that's what he lives for. He lives for a role, a task, a job, a mission. It's just in those moments in between he can make non-jokes that we love and we think he's amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, he's always my favorite character. That's why I called my dog after him. So.
It's a great name for a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Jarzia, though, throws in $22, so thank you so much. Question for all three of you. Do you think Picard Season 3 and Strange New Worlds being closer to classic Trek storytelling and the positive responses that came along with it could inspire a new golden age of Trek? Yes, I believe the reaction to Terry Trek, as it's called now, with this season, I think has been very positive. Hopefully the studios see that, and we'll get some. I mean, Strange New Worlds, I think, was a home run as well. It kind of went back to that episodic storytelling. Every episode's a self-contained story. I think that's where Star Trek is the strongest. So,
and just for the most part, 10 good stories. I mean, they could pick bad stories, they pick for the most part good stories, which really helps.
Is there any stories in particular in the first season that you would recommend? Because I only saw till episode 6, I think.
I'd have to go back through the list of titles, but
I mean, the last
one.
The last one is it's like an hour and 7 minutes. It's almost a feature-length movie, which is really shocking because I remember we watched that thing. Okay, 50 minutes, an hour and 11.
Wow,
that's a lot. And that, they're just, you can tell they're throwing money at it, and they fully. Yeah. It's a multifaceted. I mean, there's a few things that you would definitely not do as a fan if you were doing it in the original Trek theme, because that's just the new aesthetic. Like you can't. They won't do the original, so they don't. If they did, it'd be slightly better. But that's the story itself is what you're there for. You're ignoring the aesthetic because, of course, you have to. But the story is that's really interesting. I liked the one. Well, see, we might know stuff you don't know. Jeez, I like the one with the Vulcan prison. Have you seen that one?
I have not.
The one because oh god, this is great. Tides of Turning that's been out for a year. So the end is phenomenal because me and Stuart both, and we mentioned Law, we mentioned Lyle, we mentioned Mini Q. There are characters that you would of course mention in any situation with this other character, and for Stranger Worlds to actually utilize something that I was in the sofa watching it. They're not gonna do that, are they? Scene progresses? No. They say the name, like, oh, you did it! And it works because it's thought through. And it's like, good. Of course it should be this person. But you didn't have to do it. But you did. And that was a huge season 2 bump to me, yeah.
They're going to have a crossover with one of the other
Lower Decks.
Lower Decks. How are they going to do I presume the actors don't actually look like the characters, but they're going to...
Oh, they do.
They're pretty close.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The two they're picking definitely do.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Yeah. Well, they've said they will be both animated and live action. That's kind of been said. In what way and how much. But they did go up and film on the sets.
Yeah.
So
it would be interesting to see how that happens.
And I remember they said... Because they do scenes as live action, and Tawny Newson, who plays Mariner, they cramming a lot of dialogue in by speaking very fast. It's a frenetic show. Stranger Worlds is a lot slower, and that's fine. It works. And she was saying, because Frakes, I think, directed at least part of that. I think he was there in some way. And they had to actively have the teams kind of find a new rhythm because, boy, the scenes went really quick when they were talking because it's just the way they were doing it. And how do they find their character now slowed down? Because that's part of their vibe. And they have found it really fun because it's like you're fresh again, but also you've got to be really who they are. But the question is, will they truly address the visual style? Will Mariner, who has literally seen TOS in Lower Decks, will she look around and say, the fuck is this? Or will we just ignore it because it doesn't look like what she knows TOS to be? So she should say, if they're clever, she would say something and move on.
Oh, so you mean the visual stylings, the visual reboot, basically, that this Enterprise 1701 has gotten? She's seen the original.
Well, in Lower Decks, they show TOS all the time. So So the character knows.
Proper.
Yeah, the character knows what TOS looks like. So if she walks on the Enterprise, she should obviously know it doesn't look right. Like that would obviously be the joke you would do if you were writing it, like really knowing it.
Let me ask you this, because I don't know whether you feel the same way, and I don't see this ever happening, but I was telling people, look, season 3 is worthwhile. A lot of people are like, no. I want all of the last 14 years of Star Trek going back to 2009. I want it all like consigned to some other canonical thing, and we'll just go back to the original continuity from 1966 to 2005 and essentially reset Star Trek again. And I don't think that that's realistic. And I'm actually happy enough with the end of season 3 in the sense that I feel that Star Trek is in a good place and it's sort of reformed, that if they use this as a jumping off platform for the 25th century, because we kind of done with prequels, I kind of want to move forward. And as good as Strange New Worlds, I'm sure is, I sort of went, I kind of want to go to the 25th century. So I think it's in a good place, and I think we can go forward from here, regardless of what happened in the past that we may or may not have liked. But would you guys have wanted to see something like that? Would you like to have seen a reset or no?
It's a great Stuart question.
Why me? I think it can be addressed correctly, and they have a lot of opportunity, especially with Discovery doing its own thing, to actually cause or create an explanation that fits, like a multiverse thing. Because when I was watching Enterprise, I wasn't the biggest fan of season 1 and 2 of Enterprise, honestly, because it was screwing with my headcanon, a lot of the stuff that had come out over the years, and kind of retconning things. And I was like, And then we heard about the Temporal Cold War, and I'm like, oh, okay. So all the things that don't make sense are going to make sense at the end of this, because it's the Temporal Cold War that's screwing things up. They have the perfect out to write themselves into the prime timeline.
And what did Kurtzman say in Discovery Season 1? He kept saying interviews. What did he say?
It'll line up with TOS visually and perfectly by the end.
No, he just said line up with canon, but he's like, don't worry, by the end of Season 1, it'll line up with canon. He didn't say visually, but it's like, nope.
So, I mean, Doug Drexler's kind of chalked it up to, like, Star Trek's a multiverse now, much like the MCU, which is fine, sure. Like, you got the Kelvin timeline, you got the Disco timeline, in my opinion, the Discovery one, then you got the Prime timeline. So, yeah, I'm hoping that they can tie it up and at least explain some of it, but I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to actually do that.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
They've included a future Kelvin TNG person in Discovery. Yeah, from the Temporal Cold War. Which is it? Kelvin versus TNG style.
Yep.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. The longer it goes on, and the longer Trek is sort of passed from each series from producer to producer, this is going to become more of a mess unless someone takes control of the reins and actually brings under control. I said before that what they could do, if they wanted to, was say that 66 to 2005 is canon. Then you have Kelvin, which is the movies, and then you have Prime, which is Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, Prodigy, and Picard. But the problem is Picard is so much more in keeping with canon. And there are elements of all of them that have bits of canon that make sense that you want to include in canon. There's some good stuff that Discovery has done. There's some good stuff that not as much as I would have liked, but you know what I mean? I'm being kind here. But the point is that it's getting a little messy. But maybe this is what happens with a bloated franchise that's over 50 years old, and maybe we should just be grateful we got what we got at this stage. You know, I'm not sure this franchise has as many years ahead as it has behind, but we'll see.
But the irony is, it really is only Discovery Season 1 and Strange New Worlds. Those are the only things that the outliers, because Prodigy literally showed the 60s and it was insanely well done. But
is that wholly true though?
Yes, not remotely altered.
But no, I'm not disputing Lower Decks. I mean Picard, because we had that shot when he walks into Starfleet at command, and the hologram above his head is
Strange New Worlds Enterprise.
But that's the only example. That's the thing.
There's a few other small ones probably, but
yeah. I mean the tiniest of examples. I mean Picard for the most part steers clear of everything in season 1. For the most part, season 2 mostly as well. Season 3 obviously is going full on.
Except for using Discovery shuttles everywhere.
Well, that was season 1, yeah. But Lower Decks is entirely faithful. Prodigy's overly faithful, you could argue, for Prodigy. It's like, don't need to be that faithful. To the point where I've talked to people on both teams, and they just don't even, there's an episode in Lower Decks where they could have used either Quinto or Ethan Peck to play a Spock. And we would be like, okay, that makes sense. But they chose not to because there's only one Spock in their mind. And both people said, there's only one Enterprise when we think of Enterprise. So every single other team is doing the canon, all of them. Except the Discovery people who know why, and then the Strange World was coming off them, and that's still Akiva Goldsman, who was still Discovery Season 1. So that's still the same people who are forcing that. And then Picard is now back with a Trek fan. So it's really is just that slice of microcosm of one and the other. So all you have to do is say, they're a visual reboot, and when they end, good for them. You know what I mean? Like who is going to talk about Discovery Season 1 in 30 years versus TOS Season 1? You know?
Oh man, there'll be people in about 7 or 8 years' time, and they'll be in YouTube comments going, "I grew up with this show."
Yep. It's a Phantom Menace thing all over again.
You say that, but it's so violent and negative. 10-year-olds aren't watching Discovery Season 1. 5-year-olds aren't. There's nothing inspirational. There's no one to grab hold of at all, except maybe strong black female, but there's lots of other media for that. It's not a show that makes anybody think anything yay, right? Versus TNG, you literally have thousands of people who are in their profession because of Star Trek. From TOS and TNG, Voyager, I'm sure, Enterprise to a certain extent. Discovery will not have that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of people, you hear those stories that they come up to the actors and they say, I became a pilot, or I entered aerospace. I joined NASA because, I became an astronaut because of you guys. And I don't know if young people have the same level of inspirational science fiction stuff. Maybe it's other franchises. Maybe it's not Star Trek. But Star Trek should be, it should be like RMB says, it should be like the Rembrandt of science fiction. And I just feel that maybe vandalized is too strong a word, but neglected in some respects. I think that the quality has not always been there. Discovery, I think, is an example of that. We're just as Trek is starting to maybe unite the fan base and return to its roots and get good again. They're about to cancel a bunch of shows and run out of money. So I don't know what's going to happen. But
also, they're not necessarily. They're just not renewing. I mean, Discovery is just not renewed. You know, you don't always assume any show gets another season. Shows aren't defined. Aren't set up for 10 years.
Yeah, but like if you knew the money issues that they have there, I mean, they're a huge loss now. I think they're definitely like in the red in a major way. I think it's multiples of tens of millions anyway. And that show was very expensive, and that's why
over budget every year. I mean, you don't commission 3 new episodes to fix a storyline without obviously now going over budget 15-20 million after a huge budget anyway. It's astounding.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people in the chat are saying that Enterprise wasn't liked when it first came out, and a lot of people are defending it, saying they loved it. I wanted to love it. And I tried getting into it for the 2 seasons, and I enjoyed a lot of it. But like I said, it messed with my canon. Then season 3 came along with the Xindi War, and I noped out. And because why create the Xindi when you have all these other rich races that you have from the past you could use or draw in? And basically, the Xindi are just like the Starfleet battles, Interstellar Concordian. It's the exact same thing. 5 species that are one. So why create new stuff? It kind of pissed me off. Came back for season 4 because season 4 was great, but they knew they were wrapping up, so they were kind of doing all their good stuff that season. And then going back years and years and years later and watching season 3. Season 3 is fantastic of Enterprise, writing-wise and storytelling-wise. But I tuned out. I was one of the people that I feel kind of responsible for maybe having been part of the culture that canceled it, because I just stopped watching. I didn't care about season 3. But I really should have, because the writing was fantastic. It was such a good show.
Well, Stuart, you made a great. It's a great analysis there, in the sense that I feel the same way. Like I used to rag on Voyager so much, and Enterprise, right? But you still watch it. Still came back and watched it. I nitpicked the crap out of the show, and then I went back and actually watched, because I always said first 2 seasons of Enterprise are really slow, and the pacing was bad, and I didn't like it. And season 3 I really liked. I often said that season 3 of Enterprise was better than Buffy's final season. I just think it had a great balance between standalone and arc, and I would have preferred if Star Trek was still like that. And then season 4 was fantastic. But actually I rewatched the first 2 seasons again, and I was like, yeah, there's a few episodes there that are not very strong, but what was I complaining about? This is actually okay. This is decent. There's a lot of good stuff in there that's very watchable, and it's what I liked about that era is it's very cozy, you know. And then in Voyager, I'm like, this is a great show. Why was I complaining? You know, so we were spoiled because television, you know, at the time was just exceptional.
Yeah.
You know, there was some great stuff. The X-Files, Buffy, we mentioned. You know, there was
the
so
Stargates, the BSGs. Jesus.
Yeah. Atlantis was phenomenal, and then we were robbed with Universe. By the time it ended, it was just.
The last three are freaking incredible. Pisses your eye off.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to some of the super chats, guys. Ray Ricks, £5, says, I already care more for the Titan crew than the Discovery crew.
Yeah.
I would be there for a Shaw-led Titan series. Yep. Ray Ricks also says, the problem with Disco, and by extension Burnham, for me, was moving from ensemble cast to essentially having a main character who they didn't develop.
And Sonique was lovely.
Didn't develop.
I met her, and she's really nice.
Yeah, I think they started treating her character a little bit better. She got better when she became a captain.
Yeah, season 3 and 4 she's good.
There's character development there.
All 4 she's good. Yeah.
Can you name the bridge crew of the Discovery?
There's Rice.
But we do 2-hour reviews every week. We're a different case study on this.
Okay.
Yeah. True. I don't know their full names though.
Bryce.
Reese. Detmer.
Washington, yep.
And who's the blonde chick? Mitchell?
No. Well, she's not Aryan, because she was Aryan. Oh. That's why she's not Aryan.
And Big Mike.
Daniel Hoshlow, $5. Netflix needs a live-action Gargoyles. More Jonathan Frakes is needed. Yes.
Yeah, remember that.
Bold super chat there. I like it.
Eric Skelton, $5. What does Trekyards think about listing the best Star Trek scenes? Like 1, the Captain Shaw speech. 2, Picard announcing the death events in Cedo Jaxa. What do we think about listing the best Star Trek scenes? Like,
from this season?
I don't know if that's what they mean or not. You mean like a top 10 list?
That'd be a thing. Yeah, we've done a top 10 lines. That was really fun.
Yeah. Might be something we consider even from this season.
Nielsen. Hey, Joshua, sorry. Nielsen.
Hey, Nielsen.
Good job. It took a 285 person live audience and 1 person to say it. Good job. One of you knew.
Joe Brown throws in $20.
Thank you.
Is the seeming lack of character development a defect of the serialized version of Trek? Episodic Trek seems to do better with character development. Thoughts? I absolutely agree with you because, first of all, there was 26 episodes per season before, all individual microcosms. So if you got one episode that didn't quite hit the mark, it was just a shit episode. It didn't affect the rest of the storyline. And you got to see different aspects of each character. They each got episodes focused on them. So I think the episodic does actually work better for character development. Yes, because you also have different writers writing those kind of episodic stories. You get different perspectives put into your character.
And I'll jump in then, Dave. I'd love to hear your answer as well. But I disagree to a certain extent because I think there's a little bit rose-tinted glasses there. TOS was episodic. There is no character development except in the movies. Now, TNG, you're right, 26 episodes, huge difference. But they actively said...
The 60s was a different form of storytelling back then.
I get it, but they're saying because of serialized. That wasn't so that by itself, the argument doesn't fly just by that. And TNG, because they actively, as you say, they had this is a Crusher episode, we can't put a Crusher next to a Riker, next to a Picard who's already done an episode. If they had a serialized format and said, this week we'll use Detmer's skills... and she'll be the sort of second lead with Burnham, and did that, you would have the entire cast fleshed out by the end of the 10. And it would work.
I'd be able to remember their names. Whatever you guys know their names, but I'd be able to remember their names.
But what do you think, Dave? Do you agree with that? That it's not necessarily serialized, but
in general, standalone is a more of a challenge. It requires more skill as a writer to tell a complete beginning, middle, and end in 25 minutes. And whereas the current format, it's like, we did set this up. Okay, that episode maybe wasn't so great, but at least we got X, Y, and Z done as part of the overall story arc.
And also B plots that could be good.
Yeah, the issue though is I think it can encourage laziness, but at any rate, yeah, no, definitely. When you get to do a character-focused story, because when you're dealing with these short seasons and you have a story to tell, and you know where you're going by the end, and of course the problem with Mystery Box as well is that there is always inevitably at least one episode where there is a hell of a lot of exposition that has to be dumped in dialogue because you've set up lots and lots of stuff, and then you go, okay, we've got the audience to this part. They paid their subscription. We're at episode 8 or 9 or whatever it is. Now, before we get to the big finale, we got to answer a bunch of their questions, and now we got to do the big thing at the end. And that's always the way it inevitably goes. And all the while, you're not focusing necessarily on characters. And that's why it's great to have that when you don't have to dance around a big bad or a big serialized story for the whole season. But having said that, Picard got it right this season, because it is so character focused. I think that's possibly because of the format of being bottle based and everything. But look at the amount of character payoff you've already had in these first 4 episodes. And
there's characters that have been developed and we've known for 7
years.
years.
Yeah, that helps.
So,
well, I feel like this season they've taken an approach of there's almost a mystery box per episode, which is also completed, which lets you as the audience think, oh, that's a great reveal, but they're not answering the big stuff. So it has a continual evolving feel. You know, who is a handler? Mystery box. Oh, it's Worf. Okay, great.
And here's the thing, though. What's great about this season, and it'll become obvious when you've completed it, is when you go back, you go, it's not like they thought it through. It's not like there was bits of it made up as it went along. You'll go, oh, that's why they said this in episode 2, or that's why that was there in the beginning of episode 1, or that's why that was there. And see that when he said that in episode 4, that's because later. So there's lots of those things, little nuggets that they've put in there. And I will say this, there's another Easter egg at the end of this next coming episode, and just, I know you guys will pick up on it because that's your job, but a lot of people won't see it. And so I hope that you see it because, yeah.
Okay, well, there you go. All right, Space Station Sci-Fi 1 throws in £1 with no comment, but thank you so much.
What a great name, thank you.
Troy Ulysses, £10.
Thank you.
Defending Strange New Worlds. In the 90s Pike comic, the Mighty Maroon redesign, for example, is from there. In their version, it's Colt that sees a different future, where Pike avoided his accident and still captains the Enterprise. Wow. Comics for the win.
So not quite as original as we thought. Oops.
No. Monster Maroon is still shit, though. Chuck A puts in $2.
Thank you.
Great live stream, Stuart, Samuel, and Dave. Thank you so much, Chuck.
Okay.
And Ray Ricks again with £5. BSG was serialized and had great character development.
Yeah, that was.
Yes. Well, they had an ending in sight from the beginning of writing that show, though, I think. They kind of had their destination set. So,
or their lack of destination, we should kind of say.
Well, yeah.
But
I mean, it's good to have a cohesive idea before you start doing something.
And I want to jump back to the Enterprise stuff about retrospect, because contrast is so freaking important, especially with a little bit of time. The biggest thing I hear after the 3 J.J. Abrams Lucasfilm sequels, boy, I like the prequels more now, or they weren't quite as bad as I remember, because now people have seen what worse Star Wars is, at least for a lot of it, and therefore they appreciate the other one. So it's not that they've got better, they've seen what actually bad stuff is.
You can feel the Lucas in it.
Yeah.
It's like,
so is Enterprise better than you remember, or is it that now you've seen it done bad, which means okay looks good? Because I think Enterprise season 1 and 2 are okay, but now you've seen bad, so it feels better. What do you think?
No, I don't think so, actually. Because here's the reason why is I think it wasn't what came after for me, because I don't actually watch that much television. There's a few shows that I'll watch if people really recommend it, but I just don't have the time. But when it was the 90s and early 2000s, there was so much Trek on. And like you say, like now they have tons of shows. There's 4 or 5 shows on at once, but they don't do super long seasons. But back then, it was on for half the year. And you had 2 shows. You had Voyager and DS9 concurrently, the odd next-gen movie. So we were spoiled. We took it for granted. There was always another Voyager. Always another Voyager. And it was just, there'll just be another one. And so you could nitpick and you could criticize and you could, and season to season, there wasn't a whole heap of change on the show. I mean, fundamentally, there's not an awful lot of difference between, season 4 and season 7. A little bit, the actors have got a little bit older. The CGI is a bit better. But other than that, it's, you could slot them writing wise. You could slot a script into season 4 or 7, and it wouldn't have made any difference, right? I think the first 3 seasons were a little bit different, but
just give Kess the Borg stuff. She'll totally just exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Although 7 changed a lot, actually. 7 did change from seasons 4 to 5.
Yeah. Sean O'Sullivan, though, €2. Disco Hall's garbage and Foley loves ice hockey. I don't like ice hockey, despite being a Canadian.
Oh,
so sorry. I'm a sports guy.
What about maple syrup hockey? We play on the giant maple field.
Can't put maple syrup in front of anything and make it Canadian. I'm sorry.
No, on something, Stuart, on the ice field. No.
But I have to say this: there was a bunch of season 2 of Enterprise that I didn't see actually up until a few years ago, and one of them is. And I can never get the name of this episode right. It's kind of a weird name.
Well, describe it. Let's see when we work out what it is.
It's the one where there's a species that has cogenitor.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Cogenitor. The ending of that episode is super Star Trek and absolutely like bone-chillingly brilliant performance between Scott Bakula and Connor Trinneer. It's a shocking, like, wow, they didn't do this kind of stuff on Voyager. Like it's a great story. That's what I highly recommend. And then there's obviously another one. I think the best of the season is Regeneration. What a clever story! Because I thought, oh man, not the Borg again. They did the Borg so many times on Voyager, and they came up with a very clever, compelling reason to bring them back by tying it into the events of First Contact in a really subtle but believable way. But yeah, season 3 and 4 is.
Although it's funny because then in theory now you've got Regeneration that confirms Enterprise in a different timeline, because you can't have Regeneration without First Contact, and if First Contact didn't happen, time travel is still linear once. Then it's a loop.
Look, we were always told that it was stated like the first Earth vessel, not just the first Federation ship to carry the name Enterprise, and so this ship should not have been called Enterprise. And then I thought, well, maybe it's a case that First Contact once again changed the timeline because they went back in time and said, that's our ship, that's the Enterprise. And Zefram Cochrane was like, yeah, maybe we should call the first Warp 5 ship the Enterprise, inspired by the Enterprise E.
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense.
There's a few shockingly worked things. That's why you can actively say that NX goes into Discovery that time, that the tech works fine. It's actually very clean if you look at it that way. It's just
Carbon Creek. Someone said Carbon Creek in the comments. That's another great season 2.
Yeah. But it just fit.
But then,
sorry.
If that creates the Kelvin timeline, that muddies the waters a lot, because then
the Discovery timeline.
I know, but then they muddies the waters a lot with the actual Prime timeline, because they start mentioning Archer and stuff.
Well, he still lived, just wasn't on a ship called Enterprise.
Yeah.
Who found the Regeneration ship? I mean, that'd be small tweaks, but it'd still be a new timeline. And Regeneration would be a bigger change. But Enterprise is just for me, they just took less interesting chances and was just less inspired.
Yeah.
Because Enterprise could, should, would. Voyager, they have the epitome of technology. They're all exceptionally well trained. They're calm, whatever. Trip Tucker is not a lot of things in that list. He's a guy from Earth that is really excited about being in space.
And he likes catfish.
And like his dad just worked on the farm because his dad was in the Third World, like that young ago. So Enterprise is best when it takes the ideas of later Trek and puts it through the unique lens of Enterprise. You can't just do Voyager stories or TNG stories because they are. The way they look at the universe is radically different. Warp 5 was a huge jump for them, but it takes 4 weeks to get to Kronos in one show. It takes 3 months in the other show, and then on JJ it takes the same day.
2 hours at JJ.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
These are important things to know.
There should have been like cultural but technical and just practical differences. Whereas it unfortunately, I think what let it down in its first 2 seasons and led to its inevitable cancellation, and because it lost so many audience members, is the fact that it just wasn't okay. It still had to be Star Trek at its core, which I think it was, but it wasn't different enough from Voyager. What was different was they changed the sets. You know, they had great production values and great CG. It was filmed brilliantly and cinematically, and it was wonderful, edited very well. They had this nautical feel to the ship. It looked like a submarine. So it looked brilliant. Like, finally, I think the sets are the best sets they produced at that point. But it still was fundamentally, it's the same format as Next Generation. It's the same format as Voyager. And it shouldn't have been. It was 200 years beforehand. I think they should have been. I always said should they not be saluting each other? It would have been a little bit different, or I don't know. But there's a lot of things that could have been done, and instead. But this is the Voyager effect as well. I mean, if you read, there was a book, the production book that was published about Voyager at the time, behind the scenes, and when Rick Berman was creating that show, Paramount wanted another Star Trek series to run concurrently alongside Deep Space Nine. He didn't actually want to create another one. He said, no, we've got the movies, we've got Deep Space Nine. What do we want to go and create another show about another ship going through space? We've done that. And that's why the production codes at the beginning of Voyager were 8.1, 8.2, because they basically created the Next Generation Season 8 with different characters and a new ship. And that's what they wanted. They said, just keep it going. And it sort of, and that's the thing, that there was always this is why we take it for granted, I suppose, that it was just the same cookie cutter product reproduced again. I'm not saying there wasn't great stories. Obviously there was, but it wasn't taking enough risks. If you look at Voyager, we talked about the 7 of 9 failing to get enough character development. But the same is true of that whole show. Someone mentioned Battlestar Galactica. Voyager should have been a darker show. Actually, if any of the shows that were going to be dark, it shouldn't have been Discovery. It should have been Voyager. They were trying to get home. They should have been limping home. It should have been like Year of Hell for like 5 or 6 seasons. Like, that's there was this at the beginning of the series. There's such an inconsistency in the writing. They were talking about, we don't have enough replicator rations. Okay, all right, we're gonna have to ration everything. Okay, that's why we need to open the galley. We're running out of power. What are we gonna do? And then by seasons 5 and 6, they were like, yeah, let's just share Starfleet technology that we said that we would never share with the Kazon, and that we were like, having a big issue with, what was her face, the Bajoran who was really a Cardassian,
Seska.
Right? We had this traitor on our ship. She was sharing replicators with these Kazon, and then later they're like, hey, do you want some replicators in season 6? It was just all over the place.
But the thing is, I think that's called the development. Because they think they're going to take 70 years to get home. They've already lost many people. Of course they would be super against for the rules in the first year. And by the 7th year, with 30, 40, 50 more to go, Janeway will be dead by the time they get home, potentially, of old age. Of course they're more willing to bend those rules. I think that's actually probably the smartest thing they could have done. If they stayed season 1, it would have been weird.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, fundamentally, between budget and practicality of the particular type of format of the show was... they weren't in a position to have the ship beat up like Year of Hell. You have to continue to keep using stock shots. They didn't have the money to do it, in fact, Enterprise season 3 did a better job of that prolonged resource intensive season that Voyager should have been doing. But they didn't have the money to do it, and I think that was chiefly the reason why the show was sort of a little bit inflexible.
But Stuart's heard this argument every time we talk about it, but I never buy the ship would look damaged argument, because we've seen 7 years, 26 stories, or like 300 days out of 7 years. Most of the time they're spent at warp, where there's no assignments going on, so they have got dozens of hours of free time as a crew. And the best thing you can do is fix the ship. And most things are going to be fixable inside. The outside is just replacing hull plates. It wouldn't take that long with work bees. And if you want to keep the crew feeling like a home, it's your home, that you might be on your generational ship. You're going to keep it as clean as possible. And it gives a regiment feel. I think it's way more realistic, because like I say, if you have 80 hours to your next mission, just fix the ship in the meantime. You've got a crew that are meant to be out exploring and they're not doing anything. You've got ample time to do stuff like fixing the ship.
replicators.
Yeah, I look.
Enterprise that works because they haven't got any supplies. They've not got anything. They can't replicate stuff. But Voyager, of course, they can fix a ship. I mean, they can fix ships in days.
I just really like that story arc where there's one episode towards the end of, I think it's Azadi Prime, the end of season 3.
Mm-hmm.
The ship gets pummeled hard,
amazing shot,
internally and externally, until the 3rd episode of season 4 is where they finally get the ship properly repaired. And I just felt this feels realistic. Like I'm invested in the state of how this journey has taken its toll on everybody, including the ship. And it feels like I feel very much like this place is a living, breathing place. Whereas with Voyager, I feel that there was a lot of that sense of 7 of 9 would be like talking to Tuvok in astrometrics. I can never say that word at the end of the episode, and she'd talk about sort of what she learned in that day, and then the next episode it had all been forgotten.
Well, that's certainly true.
The biggest one for me for that is when Neelix died. He died. There was no afterlife. He was like depressed beyond reason. Next week, everything's all right again.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that would affect the character for a long time. So.
Yeah. I mean, you can't fix emotional damage that way, but you can fix structural damage.
Yeah.
I think the way I'd agree with you, though, is that if they were being smart, it would have been, if it were a giant space battle last week, the start of this next week would be some damage remain, and clearly they've been fixing it over the between episodes. They'd always be fresh at the end of, like, after enough time, but nothing will last more than an episode or 2. But yeah, to see a little bit of damage follow would be the best idea.
You could cover that in the captain's log, though. After a week and a half of repairs, we finally got whatever. Like, but you'd have to do that like every episode.
Well, exactly. Yeah, because people forget that most of the time you just spent at warp, and remember because they could have got home in 35 years if they'd gone full warp the entire time. It's 70 years because they want to stop and look at things. And
you just reminded me when you said warp there. So I'm just going to shift gears to Discovery for a second, if I can. What are your thoughts on these detachable warp nacelles? Because I brought this up with the other guys on podcast, and their head is in their hands about this stuff. Like, who thought that was a good idea? You enter a magnetic dampening field, and your warp nacelles fly off. This is the most important part of the ship. It should probably be connected to the ship, right? I mean,
it's future tech. It's future tech. I mean, who thought like 20 years ago we'd be able to charge our phones with induction? I have no problem because they need to do up the stakes because they've already had holograms. They already had a whole bunch of futuristic stuff that they shouldn't have had in that time period.
Yes.
So to go to the future, you need to do something like that. I have no problem with it, honestly. Technology advances, yes, dampening field, but I mean, an anti-dampening field device. I mean, and you gotta think they're attached most of the time. They detach for certain things, right? So.
Well,
I have no issue with it.
It's also a multifaceted thing because without shields, every single Starfleet ship is killable. One torpedo destroys the bridge, kills the crew. One torpedo destroys the warp nacelles, gone. These ships are entirely fragile. We've seen what one torpedo did in Star Trek 6. It blew through the saucer. So these ships are not designed to run without their shields, because if they do, they'll die very quickly. So all situations are based on shields, and battles are going to be a couple of days in your year if you're lucky, if you're unlucky, I should say. And so if 9.999 times out of 10 having the detachable warp nacelles gives you greater speed, and the 0.0 time you might get killed from something, that's a fine trade-off because they might have now got ultra slipstream for that ability set. I mean, do you know what I mean? That's the least of your problems once you've got that much tech. And also, they can't. No one has warp post burn, so these ships aren't even doing anything, and they're not even seeing ships that have. There's no armadas left anywhere in the galaxy, so these ships are just doing, basic runs. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I understand why Rick Berman was thinking at the end of Voyager. We've gone into the future. We've done a lot of fancy tech stuff, and they threw a lot of stuff in Endgame. And to go forward again was going to be the challenge, and that's why he said it might be interesting to go back. I would have no problem with the Federation even just organically or by necessity or because of war or because of scarce resources or whatever it might have been, for them to tell a story where they had to technologically regress and it becoming a kind of a fate of empires type story.
Which they did in Picard. They destroyed Utopia Planitia and killed the Roman Empire.
Like that's the thing.
It's regressed.
Exactly, but the thing is, it was handled poorly, and the idea that the Federation would become insular, that makes sense. I mean, that's the way empires can rise and fall, and they change. It might have been interesting, is like that they're no longer the primary superpower in the quadrant, and they have to grapple with the fact that their power has declined somewhat. It's an interesting story there. How do they overcome that? And how does that affect the fleet? How does that affect their relationship with other races in particular? Do they now feel that they have to jettison the Prime Directive a little bit or modify it heavily? It needs must. That could have been interesting. That's not what we got, but some sort of Star Trek Federation, which that's actually a book. It's actually a pretty good book. It's written before First Contact.
Oh yeah.
But I wish that had been canon instead of what they ended up going with. But it's not really there.
But what do you think are answers about, especially the detachment cells, about the shields there for a reason, etc., etc.?
Yeah, well, it was the same with what they did with the comm badges by turning them into everything. It's too much, I felt, look, I get it. Like you've thought through some very proper fan headcanon explanation, and they're great, and I respect those. The problem is, I'm not sure that the writers and producers of the show were introducing that necessarily for those particular reasons. I think it was done more so as, this will be a cool looking thing, and that was that. And then the explanations came later.
By Trekyards.
But you know what? I don't want to throw cheap shots at Discovery. Like as I said before on the other show with the guys, like if you love, like, because I feel bad, like there's people who love Discovery, right? And I don't mean this in a patronizing way. It has a fan base. Like there's people who love that show. They love the characters, they love the tech, and they love the science fiction of it, and that's wonderful. And it's the same with Picard seasons 1 and 2. There are redeemable things there. I would shudder to think that we're looking back in 5 or 6 or 10 years time, going, especially Picard season 1 was brilliant. I would hope that television improves from this point forward, right? But I don't want to, like, people enjoy this stuff. Like, sit down, I'll have a beer with you. We'll talk through it. What you like about it. I have no problem with this stuff.
Well, the irony is, Stuart's often said that there's such a broad audience that people that don't like Star Trek might like Discovery, and it might be their Star Trek. They're not wrong, but if they are not interested in the character-based, wholesome stories of TNG, which is the most Star Trek you could possibly make, because it was made by Gene, it was a great cast. Like, if Discovery fans don't want TNG, that's okay. You have your show. Like, we're not going to judge you, but are they really the Trek fans that are Trek fans? If they don't, you know what I mean? Like, it could be a Star Wars fan that's never seen Trek that happens to love Beyond or Into Darkness. Like, okay, good for you. Doesn't mean you quantify in the Trek fan spectrum, Your opinion,
if they enjoy it, they're a Trek fan because they're enjoying something that's Trek.
Right.
Their version of Trek. So
their version of Trek.
That's a tough one.
But their weight should not be greater than someone who's seen all the other shows and been like, I get what the vision was, versus I liked when Spock punched Khan. That was the Spock I love. It's like, all right, well, that's wrong. So
yeah. Like I don't think any of us have the right to say who's a fan, who isn't.
We're all fans.
Exactly, they're all fans. Yeah.
It's just if you just like Discovery, then that's on you. If you just like Discovery.
I don't feel bad for you.
Yeah.
Good tea, nice house. $2.20 Canadian. Thank you so much. Enterprise season 4 grew a beard, but didn't throw an asteroid. That's a good way to put it. Sure.
Dear me.
And going back to the nacelles for just a second, the detached nacelles. I don't know if you've listened to a lot of conversations with Doug Drexler at all, Dave, but Doug, he has this phrase called ape brain, where we're stuck in this mindset that things have to be a certain way, and you got to think the Federation keeps adding more and more and more people into the Federation, more cultures, more civilizations that are way more advanced, have different technology. I have no problem with detached nacelles. That's the least of my problems with Discovery, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
Technology can advance and be that. Like, you tell somebody 50 years ago that you're going to be able to charge your phone by setting it on first of all, a phone, but second of all, by charging it by just setting it on without plugging it into anything, they would tell you you're crazy. So, I mean, technology is weird like that. It's magic until somebody, it's perceived as magic until you know how it works, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Matt Boardman, $5. Idic. People get to like what Trek resonates with them.
So you can't complain about seasons 1 or 2 of Picard, Matt. Because if you say that, you can't complain about any Trek. Because therefore it's all good.
I mean, season 2 had great scenes with John Delancey. When any scenes he was in, and so I'll be honest. I watched the first episode of season 2, and the rest of season 2 I watched through other people's reviews and clips that people posted on YouTube.
That's embarrassing.
Yeah, I couldn't watch anymore. I'm sorry. I gave
it was more difficult. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the general sentiment. Like, let me ask you this, like, hand on heart. Well, after watching these first 4 episodes of season 3, do you think that I should watch the second season of Picard all the way through?
No.
You don't.
Watch episode 1, 2, 3, and the last one.
But that's not. But that's not why you'd watch it. You can't comment on it unless you've seen it. Like, truly comment on it.
Yeah, that's the problem.
You know,
I have very good gut bacteria, Samuel. I have a feeling. Look, I get what you're saying, but yeah.
Didn't say it just.
Put it this way: it was at most a 4-episode story arc that they stretched to 10 episodes. So it's like a piece of gum. It just
put this way: you'll enjoy it the most because you can binge through it and suffer through it quickly when it gets bad. Because honestly, because
you don't have to wait.
Yeah, the waiting was the worst part because every episode thing is that it. Because when there was a 39-minute story with last time on task sequence and credits, and you're telling a 32-minute story, really? You got Patrick for 30 episodes. You tell us, really? Okay.
Yeah,
that's a problem. Yeah. But episode 1's great of season 2 because Terry wrote it, and they filmed it before season 3.
Yeah, and it's great. You know what frustrates me is it's such a tease because you're back in Starfleet. Picard's back in uniform.
He's great.
There's a new ship. There's lots of great. There's
new
a
ships.
Lovely fleet scene.
There's like 15 new ships.
Huge fleet scene, and then bang, everything's undone, and now we're in this briefly one episode. You're in this horrible universe, and then you're back in LA, and it's like,
well, Terry's
dealing with ice. You know, and
like, I'm going to give you this. This is what Star Trek should be. Boo boo. Oh, you want me to do season 3? Bye. Somebody else is picking it up, going, okay. That's what happened, essentially.
I just feel sorry for Patrick because he's had 10, and we as Trek fans are a bit better than 3 seasons with 3 different showrunners with 3 different visions, none of which really connect, and each showrunner is ignoring the past showrunner's work for the most part. You know what I mean? Patrick Stewart deserved better than this for his last outing, in theory.
Yeah, and look, Terry inherited a couple of things that he obviously had to dance around. Like, one of them is a very unpopular aspect, which was the android Picard thing, which is something we've all talked about extensively and is not
He's dead, Jim.
Decision. But the thing is, like, I take it as Picard is alive in a biosynthetic body. Like, I prefer to think of it as biosynthetic than you take his face off and there's lights and I don't want to think about that with Picard, right? You don't want to think like you can take off the top of Picard's head or the back of his head like Geordi could do with Data in the Next Generation. Like, I don't like to think of Picard that way. Okay, so and the thing is, like, people are like, oh, you can't transfer consciousness. How many episodes of Star Trek or any other Star Trek dealt with body swapping?
Yep.
Like, we had Seven and the Doctor on Voyager swapped bodies. That's just one that I can think of. There has been plenty of examples of this. Wasn't there an episode of The Next Generation where Data, O'Brien, and Deanna, they were inhabited by
criminals.
Good Starfleet that were crashed. Oh, gonna kill the crew. Oh, good. No, you're not Starfleet. No.
Right, and that was Data, and he's an android. So it is like, I'm not defending what was done at the end of that last episode, that I can't pronounce the name of the last episode of season 1. But, but the point is, like, in defense, and there is a precedent for transferring human consciousness into machines in Star Trek.
But do you know the original series? Do you know the funniest thing about that, though, Dave? About him dying? They wrote it the week before they filmed it.
I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, Patrick literally.
I didn't know until right before.
He literally only knew it because they just changed the entire ending. So Patrick got the script saying, "You are dying. We'll film it next week. Learn the script." That's how late the game Picard died. A week from shooting. How do you feel like that now, knowing that?
Well, here's the thing: like they had an opportunity with the second season to undo it, which was that when they went into that alternate Confederation universe, that was it, and he could have just kept a human body, and there was well, you're human now because that didn't happen, and that would have been fine. Instead, Q's like, oh, you got that nifty, you still have that nifty synthetic body. I'm like, no, this was a chance to get rid of that.
But there's the easiest solution though. Q's final gift to Picard: snap, Data's live, and your body's back. It's even easier.
Yeah,
it's right there in the last episode. You're alive, mon Capitan. You can now go have sex with Ira, whatever her name is. Go make babies at 96. What? What? I want to go on archaeology retreats, apparently. That was what the real solution was.
One last super chat, I think. Matt Boardman, $10. That's not what I'm saying at all, Sam. I'm saying that just because I may not like those seasons doesn't mean I'm any more of a Trek fan than someone else who does. Yeah. We know what you were saying. Don't worry. I think we'll call it there, guys. Unless you guys have anything else you'd like to say. No?
Well, there's a delay, Stu. You can't ask that and then wait 1 second. That's not how internet streaming works.
I'm waiting for you. I was asking you.
Oh, me! Oh,
not the audience.
I mean, Dave, do you have any last-minute questions for us? Like any sort of quick-fire, anything? It's like, on the spot,
I wish there was something.
I put you on the spot to put us on the spot. I see how it is. Yeah, oops.
I wish there was something I could tell you that wouldn't spoil anything significant, but we will go there. But look, so far this season, as an improvement on seasons 1 and 2, scale of 1 to 10 or whatever way you want to do it, how much for you as an improvement?
Let's do it.
50%, 80%, 100%, 10%.
I'm gonna say 80%.
Well, okay.
Why I said
it's a big step up.
Why I said to Stuart in our episode 2 review, the difference between this season and the first 2 seasons, I'm now reviewing this season on a Star Trek scale of quality. The other seasons I was reviewing it on a this is what we've got now scale of quality. Because it's not fair to review season 2 in all of Star Trek. Almost everything has ever made has been better, right? But now I can review it fairly, which means I'm now looking at it in comparison to TNG and seeing its shortfalls from budget and lighting and budget. But it got to that scale, right? It actually reached that point where it's now justifiably comparable. I mean, season 1 has a lot of interesting things this season hasn't done so far. It's been in one Nebula 4 episodes. That's very, very underwhelming. But the character work has been phenomenal. The script is, I mean, you can't even compare the scripting. I mean, it's entirely incomparable. But the fact that the seasons look like night and day. Season 1 looks a lot nicer. Season 2 is more frenetic. Season 3 is just better. But it's doing a lot less. So I'm just hoping they're saving millions by being cheap as fuck in the first 4 to spend it. And we kind of know they're doing that. But that's what we hope, to bring up that build-up, because we saved money in the first 4. So I know where it's going, but so they're in those different ways. But it's obviously better, but it's still got distinct shortfalls from budget and time.
And I think that's why there was a lot of skepticism in the beginning when people watched maybe 1 or 2 episodes, because the beginnings of both seasons 1 and 2 weren't bad. In fact, they were decent enough. And then the wheels came off after 3 or 4 episodes or so. And I can say definitively, I'm as hardcore a fan as you guys are, and I can say I love good Trek, and it stays consistent to the very end. The only one, there's one in there, as I said, that's exposition heavy, and it's maybe a small step back, but it's not overtly sort of in your face with any kind of agenda or anything. It's nothing like that. It's just, and in fact, I would argue that episode that I have less affection for, other people will really like, because it is a very good character study. So regardless, you guys are gonna be, I kind of envy you actually, because you get to watch it again for the first time, and I never. I can't remember the last time I just had this goofy grin stuck on my face for 2 hours. You know, it's just, it's a gift. It's an absolute gift. If you think it's good now, it's gonna blow you the hell away at the end. That's all I'll say. It is gonna blow you away, and I have no exaggerations. And no one is gonna come back to me and go, "Dave, I wasn't blown away." Yes, you will be. Yes, you will.
And it is risky as hell to set expectations that high. Because that is dangerous. Very dangerous.
Yeah, here's the thing. My expectations were actually very high, Samuel, when I came into this season. Because of RMB. And I sat down and I was like, okay, brilliant. I got 6 to watch in a row. I'm going to enjoy this. And I was supposed to go to bed at 10:30 that night. And I stayed up till after 2 in the morning. So I couldn't stop watching them. And it's that good. And sorry, I'm going to have to stop at some point.
Wow.
I had coffee today, so.
Well, there you go.
Well, that is awesome.
What an end note. Oh, also the poll I did for 1 hour. Don't change the poll the entire time. I asked if you had to vote for one that you enjoyed the most. 430 votes. 46% Stranger Worlds. 41% Lower Decks. And Prodigy at 13%. So that is the ones they enjoy the most. A relatively good tie between Stranger Worlds and Lower Decks. We love you, Prodigy, too. Don't worry. We love you down there at the bottom of the list.
Go watch Prodigy, Dave.
I gotta watch it. Yeah, I gotta watch it, actually.
And it gets distinctly better because you grow with the show with the kids, and by the end, you're like, they're doing this. As a CG artist, holy hell, that last thing,
I think
freaking impressive.
What I've seen, I think I would prefer to watch Prodigy than Lower Decks.
They're both really good in their own ways.
They're not comparable, really, but they both love canon.
Yeah, that's right. That's the main thing.
It's not shocking.
Yes. And on that note,
yes.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. All 278 of you. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so. And hit that like button before you leave. And I'd like to thank Dave for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you. And it was a good discussion, I think. So,
thank you for having me.
It's nice
absolutely.
Nice to digitally meet your famous voice. Because that's...
I'm just an AI. I'm not even...
Control! You're back!
Oh, good God.
Yeah.
Oh, the memories. All right. On that note... Thank you for joining us. Until next time, he is Commander.
He's Captain Foley and guest.
I'm Dave. I'm Dave. Just Dave. Nothing else. Don't even have a rank. Not even.
Sorry. I can't do that, Dave.
No rank for you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Good night, everybody.